Writinghouse, the Career Outreach Coordinator at the School of Journalism and Mass Communications at KU.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Cheers to Careers. I'm Steve Writinghouse, the Career and Outreach Coordinator at the KU School of Journalism and Mass Communications. Today I'm joined by Earl Richardson, a two-time KU grad, class of '83 at the J School, and then 25 years later he got a law degree, so we'll talk a little bit about that. So Earl, I know you've done a lot, newspapers, magazine, commercial photographer, freelance, and now you're director of photography at Earl Richardson Photography. What's it like working for Earl Richardson?
Actually, my title is director of photographer.
Oh, okay. Photographer, okay.
Well, no, that's what's it like? He is working for Earl is not pleasant. He is really a harsh critic. We don't have a holiday party. There are no holiday bonuses. So it's the only work I could find, but you know.
But the travel is good. You've traveled quite a bit.
The travel can be good.
Okay.
Yeah. No, actually, being your own boss is probably one of the best things, and if you do it long enough, you're spoiled for working for anybody else. So, especially if you office at home, where my office is, a lot of work I do in my pajamas in the winter. So it's okay.
So no dress code.
No dress code.
Okay.
No.
And I read on a previous interview, you've been taking photos for quite a while. I think, you were 12 years old. I thought I read where your dad, chemist, had a dark room. Do you remember when you saw that first photo?
Yeah, actually, it was like 50 years ago, probably this month.
Really?
My dad was a hobbyist and had a camera, dark room. Never really was too interested in it. And then for whatever reason, I went to 7th grade and he had me shoot a roll of film, showed me how to use the camera, how to use a light meter. And I remember just the feeling watching that print come up for the first time in the developer. It was just magical. And so pretty much from that point on, much to my parents' chagrin, I wanted to be a photographer. And it's 50 years.
50 years.
7th grader at West Junior High School here in Lawrence.
So do you remember what that first photo was that you saw come to life, or
I think it was
topic or subject matter?
I'm pretty sure it was my dog.
Is it a dog? Okay.
Yeah, my dog, a Boston Terrier named Pudgy. So.
And obviously, you've taken a lot of photos over the years. I mean, portraits, sports action, news, landscape. I think you've even done some food photography, right? What do you like to shoot?
If I had to eat, I like anything that involves people. And that's probably one of the reasons why I was attracted to photojournalism, because it had to do with people. So anything that really has to do with people. So a lot of what I do now is on college campuses, student life sort of stuff. Where they pay me to come onto campus and use my skills as a photojournalist to depict student life and activities in a realistic way. I'll shoot anything. That's one of the issues about being a freelancer here in this part of the country. It's really hard to have a niche that you can depend on all the time. So I will do anything. I've done a little bit of everything, but if it involves people and you need to tell people's stories, that's what's most interesting to me.
And speaking of people, I know I follow you on social media. You shoot your grandchildren quite a bit.
A lot.
People. I think I saw some comment where you might be shooting them more than the royal family. Has their photo taken?
Yeah, well, I have 5 of them now, and the oldest one will be 12 in December. So I sat down this morning, and a friend of mine has really been pushing me hard to think about a book project of my grandchildren. And so I was looking, I've got 35 or 36 2-terabyte hard drives full of stuff. And it's not all them, but I'm going to guess half of that is them. So they've probably had their pictures made, the oldest one is maybe, I don't know, several million times. It's probably an exaggeration to say, but it might be close.
So are they always up for it when you say, hey, I want to test this lighting out, new photo, or is it like, oh, come on, I don't want to do this again? Are they pretty receptive to you? Yeah,
at least the older 3. The older 3 are almost 12, 9, and 8. Yeah, they're pretty receptive. They've just grown used to it. They reach a point, when they're 6 or 7 years old, maybe, where they say no. And I just say, I'm sorry, it's not negotiable. We're going to go do this. Give me 5 minutes of your time. And so now sometimes the older ones will seek me out and say, let's do a picture, So,
yeah, I always love your... I love all your photography, but when you do the family celebrations, the birthdays, and over time, and it's amazing. So I hope they appreciate that, because I think years from now, I think they'll say, wow, I'm so glad we have that many photos.
I hope they appreciate it. If not, they're going to be a bunch of hard drives in a dumpster somewhere.
And I know early in your career, you're part of a Pulitzer Prize-winning team. People are kind of familiar with that Hyatt Regency walkway collapse in 1981 in Kansas City, because you were interning at the time, right?
Yeah,
you were part of that team.
Intern at the Star. I didn't actually make it into the Hyatt. It happened on a Friday night. I think I was over here in Lawrence. And so I worked for the Star, which was the afternoon paper. They didn't publish on Saturdays, but they were the Sunday paper.
Okay.
So I didn't ever get into the Hyatt. I think I had one picture that was in the entry for the coverage, and it was from a funeral afterwards. And I had friends that got into the Hyatt. This is going to sound unglamorous, but the day after the Hyatt collapse, I was working, and so I made a really nice picture, but it was of like the soapbox derby. And I remember being kind of bummed that I wasn't on the scene there at the Hyatt. I remember the picture editor, Carol Greenewalt, who went to the White House shortly after that. It really impressed upon me that you're still part of the team, and there are other things we have to cover besides the disaster there. So that was my contribution to the Sunday paper that day, was a kid sitting on top of his soapbox derby car looking bummed out after he lost.
Okay. And I know kind of the mid-90s, I mean, obviously you have the film experience and film to digital. I think you were kind of one of the first ones to really take a hold of that digital, especially from sports photography. What was that transition like, going from film to digital?
It was just, it was night and day, because when you went on the road, like to shoot KU football or basketball, so you took a case full of gear, film. Sometimes the Associated Press would process your film. Sometimes you had to take chemistry on the road and go to a bathroom, like in a field house or an arena, and process, which meant that oftentimes to meet deadlines, you were going in at halftime of a game, and you don't know how it was going to end. Just hope that you had something that told that story. So you went from this, and you carried a scanner, a portable scanner, and a laptop. So you go in with all this gear. And then I remember the night at the Journal World that we made that switch. And it was KU basketball, and it was in Chicago. It was a grade 8 game. It was a 9 or 9:30 start. I remember the managing editor saying, "So you're going to shoot digital tonight?" That had been like 99 or 2000. And I said, "No." He said, "You're going to shoot digital tonight?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going to shoot digital. Are you taking your film cameras?" "No." "Well, you should take them in case there's an issue." I said, "No, there's nobody to run the film. The United Center, there's no place around there." I mean, there were so many logistical issues with shooting film that just go away when you shoot digital. So you go in carrying equipment and a laptop, and you plug your cards in. As long as you have a phone line or a Wi-Fi connection, it was just night and day. When you think about all the stuff you had to carry into one of these things, and how now you could work, since you didn't have to process film, you could work right up to the last minute, then go look what you had and send stuff very quickly. So it was a complete game changer.
And speaking of KU basketball, I know you've shot a lot over the years. I'm willing to bet from that 1988 to 2003, the Roy Williams years at KU, I bet you shot KU basketball more than probably anybody. You think that's safe to say in that 15-year window? Yeah,
pretty close. Or if there's anybody that shot as much, it'd be like Rich Sugg, maybe, from the Star, he was in my class at KU. But yeah, lots and lots of basketball. Yeah, that's probably right. Tons of basketball.
And I know right before Roy Williams, a lot of the KU fans remember the 1988 year when KU, Danny Manning, Larry Brown. You took one of those great photos. I believe it was the Elite 8 game, Pontiac, Michigan, when KU beat K-State. I think there's a great photo of Larry Brown, Danny Manning kind of embracing near the end of the game. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
game?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just got lucky. We had two photographers there. I was at the Cap Journal, and that was the position I got, looking directly across at the KU bench. So when he came off the floor and he gives Larry a big hug, didn't take much skill. It was just kind of like shooting fish in a barrel at that point.
That's a good point about photography. I mean, how much is it kind of that being prepared and just being at the right place at the right time? Is it kind of a combination?
Yeah, it's a combination. It helps to know the game and know what where you think things are going to go. I was never a great basketball player, but I played a ton of basketball, pickup basketball, when I was on campus here, and then kept playing City League for a while after that, until I got too old and broke my wrist. But so I knew basketball pretty well. So yeah, a lot of it is just knowing the game, knowing the players. Chances are good that certain things are going to happen, and just being in the right position when they happen. And then sometimes you can be totally 180 degrees out of position. You know, it's just some of it just is luck. I think Danny Manning at the time said, didn't he say something about luck is when opportunity meets preparation, something like that. Yeah, so I think that's a pretty apt description.
And I know after your newspaper career ended kind of like early 2000s, took a little time off. Then you came back to school, law school. I think your oldest daughter was a classmate of yours.
Yeah.
What was that experience like going back to law school?
Well, I was a terrible undergrad student. I mean, I was awful. If it didn't involve photography or photojournalism or journalism, I really put out a minimal effort. I wasn't all that interested. I was 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, and I thought I knew a lot, and I really didn't even know what I didn't know at that point. You know, so I was a terrible student, and my GPA was not that good. So I left the Cap Journal in 2003. I was the director of photography. I went to Freelance, and Freelance was going very well. And so it was going so well, I thought, I just need to shake everything up and go to law school, which I'd wanted to do for years, and I did that. And people think I followed my daughter to law school. No, she followed me to law school. I got in before she did. And she was an English grad here at KU and just really didn't know what she wanted to do. So most people don't ever say this, but I really, really enjoyed law school, just the challenge of it. And part of it was just proving to myself I could do this. Seeing how younger people thought about the world was interesting, because there's some really, really intelligent people in there who don't yet understand how the world works. And it was interesting to watch them come to that realization of how the world works. I had a great time. I would, it's probably, sad to say, if I had a chance to go to medical school, I'd probably do that too. My wife says no.
That'd be a great combination. And I would think you definitely brought a lot of value to the classroom. I know you're very passionate about like intellectual property, copyright issues. I mean, wow, that has changed so much in the last 25, 30 years with the explosion of the internet. I mean,
oh yeah.
How do you keep up with all that?
There's no shortage of work because whenever you shot film, you'd make a print, or if somebody wanted a copy, if they would duplicate the slide, and the quality would diminish each generation. Yep. So infringement wasn't as big a deal, but when you can make infinite perfect copies of a piece of work and distribute it around the world, in a few seconds, it's huge, and it continues just because everything's going digital, whether it's words or pictures or music. So much intellectual property is being stolen. It's just staggering. There's no shortage of work, and there's also no shortage of ignorance. People think that if they see something on the internet and there's no watermark, there's no copyright symbol, that means it's in the public domain. And as I've told infringers before, I give them the famous advice my late mother gave me: if it ain't yours, keep your hands off of it. Because thinking that something's in the public domain is the quickest way to getting a copyright lawsuit filed against you. And to keep up with it, the law, the law is starting to catch up with it, with the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and now there's a Copyright Small Claims Board. So, a lot of the claims that are out there are such small dollar, they're such small economic value, they're never going to get litigated. So having a small claims board where a photographer, writer, musician can go in and state their case is pretty big.
So do you have a lot of your photographer friends reaching out to you sometimes for advice? I would think that comes up from time to time, like, hey, this is my photo, what's going on here?
Occasionally, since my license is on inactive status, I haven't done my CLEs for a few years, so I'm not practicing. I have to be very careful. I can give you very general guidelines, but I really can't legally advise you without getting in trouble with the disciplinary authorities. But yeah, I get a fair number of questions.
And how competitive is that freelance photography market? Because it seemed like once digital occurred, everybody said, hey, I can do this for a living. There's a lot of hustle involved. Promoting yourself, networking, word of mouth. Just how competitive is it trying to survive?
It's very competitive, especially in a place like Lawrence, where there seems to be, don't know, this is maybe my perception, there's a dearth of opportunities sometimes. And you've got a lot of people out there, and they're willing to undercut each other, so they just end up pushing the basement floor lower and lower. You know, something I always tell photographers when they get started, when they ask about pricing, is if you don't value your work, no one's going to. So it's very competitive. The marketing is, I'm kind of slack on it. To be really successful, and you have to market all the time. And I don't know about you, I get email marketing, you know, pitches for whatever on a regular basis. I get sick of being marketed to. So I got to think that people out there I work for get sick of being marketed to. So what I try to do is, you know, I sent out a book a few months back, 50 copies of recent work, and so I sent it to like 50 entities that I either worked for or wanted to work for. So I try to be strategic about it, but there's a ton of competition. It's so much easier to get images digitally than it was with film. And I see a lot of people out there, I don't want to slam anybody, but I see a lot of people out there that I knew if they had to shoot film probably wouldn't be doing it because it's a lot more difficult.
Definitely. And what's the last 2 years been like with pandemic? I mean, like you said, you've done a lot of student life, college activities, event-based. I mean, I think we're seeing those come back. So what, 2 years, I mean?
God, last year was okay. It wasn't great, it was okay. This year has not been as good. I've been kind of surprised. It hasn't sprung back quite as quickly as I hoped it would. So we'll see about next year. And that's what's important to remember is, you know, if you put all of your eggs in one basket, like if you want to do higher education and student life stuff, you're setting yourself up for some heartache when that stuff, when you see that everything go away. I mean, I saw years worth of work go away in a period of a week in 2020. So what I've tried to do during this is get other skills. I got my drone pilot's license, and I've started doing some work for a friend of mine who's an architectural photographer. And what's interesting is the effects of the pandemic for photographers has varied from niche to niche. This friend of mine who's a KU grad, does a lot of architectural photography. He's had two of his best years the past couple of years because he's kind of transitioned from doing architectural photography to doing work for commercial realtors and photographing properties that they're selling. So that's who I've done a lot of work for. But you have other, you know, like myself, people that work in event photography or work, you know, close proximity to people is really important. That has really been impacted the past 2 years. I hope it comes back.
Yeah, I think it will.
We'll keep our fingers crossed. Man.
You talk about drone work, and that's another thing I think you've done a great job over the years, just adapting. I think the drone is another part of your toolkit. Mm-hmm. What's that experience been like? I mean, I've seen some of your work with the drone, and wow, what a whole new perspective.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a day when I'm out there with the drone that I don't think, man, I wish I'd had this 20 or 25 years ago when I was working in newspapers. I resisted it for a long time because I thought, and this is going to make me sound like the old man, get off my lawn. I thought it was kind of a fad. I didn't know that it was going to stay. And then right before the pandemic, I went to a DJI event, and it was basically droning for dummies. And I could see what they were doing with them now. And so in a period of 3 weeks, I went to this event. I studied for the test. I got my license. I got a drone. So I was up and working. You know, you have to get an FAA 107 license to do this commercially. And so then now what I do when I have a client, an educational client, I bring it along because, you know, as a photographer, there's so many times where you want to get, like, you're on the top step of the ladder and you think, man, if I could just get that camera 10 feet higher. Well, now you can do that, and you can look straight down. And so it really does open up, you know, points of view you've never seen before. And it's made me rethink about how I even handle things with, you know, just a regular camera. Yeah. You know, it probably helped me stay sane during the pandemic because I could go outside and I could, you know, go to the wetlands and just fly around and see things.
And this isn't really new technology, but not too many people do this, I don't think, anymore. That wet plate collodion, is that how you pronounce it? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what they were using during, the Civil War era?
Exactly, yeah.
And yeah, I've seen some of your work, and I think patience is involved with that. I mean, they got to stay still for a while, right?
Yeah, they have
to.
Yeah, either if you're making an exposure under available light, they may have to stay still for 15, 20 seconds. Even if you're shooting in a studio situation with lighting and strobes, they have to stay still long enough for you to focus it, because you focus the camera and then you put the plate in, you're blind. So then there can't be any movement. So yeah, not many people do it. Although it's kind of seeing a bit of a renaissance now. A lot of younger photographers, well, not a lot, but younger photographers are starting to do it. But it is the process that would have been pretty much what you'd have seen anything from the Civil War. From about 1852 to about 1875, it was really in its heyday.
So do you have kind of a separate studio at home set up for that, or you have to just unload all the equipment, or what's that process like?
I had a room set up at home that I shot in for about 3-4 years. And one of the bad things about wet plate is, because you're making, each plate is like you making a piece of film, you have to sensitize it in silver. And silver, if it drips onto your skin, it gives you it looks like a stain, but it's actually a little bit of a burn. But if it gets on clothing, if it gets on wood, if it gets on carpet, it'll actually stain. And so I was shooting a bunch of portraits for a show, and when I decided I was done, the carpet, because I would shoot upstairs and I would go to the back of the house to process it while it was wet. You have to do everything while it's wet, so you're always rushing from one place to another. And I stained the carpet. Finally, about a year ago, I told my wife, Teresa, so we gotta replace that carpet. And she said, then you're done shooting upstairs. So if I wanna shoot now, I either go to a friend's studio in Kansas City or take it outside, and you only need darkness, safe light darkness, red light darkness, when you put the plate in the holder and when you develop it. So most of it can be done in broad daylight. My dark room, when I go outside, is a box, and I put on a little red headlight, and you're only in it for a minute or two.
And I know your grandkids have taken their photos that way. They do a pretty good job sitting still for that?
Some of them do better than others.
But no, I'm always amazed at that work, how the focus and it's definitely powerful.
The older ones do better. The younger ones, their track record's spotty.
And I know recently, or maybe not so recently, I know you were part of the Jayhawk Media Workshop, talking to young photographers, and I know you've taught classes in recent years. What kind of message are you telling the photographers now if they're wanting to begin their career in photography? What
I've been trying to stress, and I in teaching that, and I also taught a little bit at Baker last semester, this is like, kind of beginning level photography, is to, the key thing is there's so many pictures out there being made, billions a day, I would assume, or tens or hundreds of millions. How do you set yourself apart? You're going to do that by thinking about the image you want to make, and then I'm trying to get them to not just pull up a camera and just willy-nilly push a button and shoot lots of pictures, but to think about what it is they're trying to communicate, and then giving them a strategy for, every time you make a picture, it's always a compromise in terms of, motion, depth of field, and quality due to high ISO or low ISO. So I'm trying to get them to think about what it is they want to say and how to best go about saying that within the technical parameters of the exposure triad. And sometimes when you start talking about this with these students, high school and college, eyes glaze over. It's kind of like learning to dance, putting these three things together, but just to be less reactionary and more, thoughtful about what it is you're trying to do is what I've been preaching. Yep. I hope it's getting through.
No, that's great advice. Hey, I truly appreciate you spending some time with us. Congrats on 50 years. I've been familiar with your career. I grew up in Topeka, so I think probably in the mid-'80s, early 80s, when I started following your work in the Capital Journal, and I know we overlap probably 12 years career-wise. So no, I want to say cheers to your careers, and
thank you.
thanks for being here.